As the sun sets over the hills of Canaan, dyeing the sky with hues of orange and purple, Abram finds himself on the verge of a decision that would change the course of his life and the history of his people. The land promised by God now lies under the weight of relentless hunger. The soil, which once promised abundance and hope, became arid, unable to support those who placed their dreams and faith on it. Abram, faced with this adversity, feels the weight of his responsibility. As patriarch, it is up to him to ensure the survival of his family and all who follow him. The decision to leave for Egypt, a foreign land with unfamiliar gods and customs, is not taken lightly. It is a choice born of necessity, but permeated by uncertainty and fear. The night progresses, and with it the hours of Abram immersed in deep contemplation and prayer, seeking God's guidance. The famine in Canaan is not just a physical crisis, it is a test of faith. Abram, who left his homeland by divine promise, now finds himself faced with the challenge of trusting that the same divine providence will guide him in an unknown and potentially hostile land. God's promise to make Abram a great nation echoes in his mind, mixing with the immediate concerns of hunger and survival. Sarai, his wife, sensing the turmoil in his heart, approaches with a calming presence. She not only shares the burden of the decision, but also offers her unwavering support, a testament to the power of shared faith in times of uncertainty. Together they consider the risks and possibilities, the pain of departure and the hope of refuge and provision. The decision to migrate to Egypt is finally made under a starry sky, witness to the pact between Abram and the divine. As dawn breaks, Abram's caravan begins to move, each member facing the journey ahead with a mixture of determination and apprehension. The preparations for departure are marked by a contemplative silence, broken only by Abram's instructions and the sound of animals and belongings being gathered. The journey that begins is a pilgrimage full of faith, a faith that is tested at every step, at every look back at the land that promised so much. The crossing to Egypt is not just an escape from hunger, it is a journey in search of redemption, of a future where God's promise can be fulfilled in its fullness. As Abram's caravan moves away from Canaan, he takes one last look at the promised land, a land that, despite famine, remains full of promise. It is a moment of deep emotion, where the pain of departure mixes with hope in the fulfillment of divine promises. Abram leaves not as a man defeated by adversity, but as a bearer of faith, guided by the conviction that, even in the most challenging moments, God remains faithful. The journey to Egypt unfolds under the vast sky, a constant reminder of God's presence and providence. Each step into the unknown is imbued with a faith that transcends fear, a faith that sustains Abram and his people through the desert toward an uncertain future, but delivered into the hands of a God who promises to never abandon them. In this time of transition, Abram not only seeks the physical survival of his people, but also deepens his understanding of the journey of faith he is called to take. The decision to go to Egypt, with all its implications and challenges, becomes a milestone in Abram's spiritual journey, a testament to his unshakable trust in the God who called him and promised never to leave him. As Abram's caravan leaves Canaan, the rising sun bathes the desert in golden light, offering a stark beauty that contrasts with the severity of the journey ahead. Abram's decision to go to Egypt is marked by a deep faith in God's providence, but also by an acute awareness of the dangers that this decision entails. The journey through the desert proves to be a test of endurance, both physical and spiritual. The relentless sun, scarcity of water, and the empty expanse of the desert test the limits of each member of the caravan. Abram, as a leader, watches his family and followers with a look full of concern and determination, offering words of encouragement and leading by example, keeping his faith unshakable like a compass. At each rest stop, Abram turns to God in prayer, seeking strength and guidance. These moments of spiritual communion are crucial, not just for Abram, but they serve as a reminder to everyone in his company of the source of his hope and perseverance. Nights in the desert under a sky full of stars become a setting for deep reflections on God's promise and the uncertain future that awaits them in Egypt. As they approach Egypt, fears about what awaits them begin to grow. Sarai's fame for her beauty in particular presents a dilemma that Abram fears could put them in danger. The decision to introduce her as her sister is made after much deliberation, a plan born out of hopelessness and the need to protect her family at all costs. This choice, full of risks and moral consequences, reveals the complexity of the decisions that Abram must make in the midst of uncertainty. Upon entering Egypt, Abram's caravan is confronted with a new reality, a land of abundance contrasting with the arid desert they left behind. But this abundance comes with its own challenges. Sarai's introduction to the Pharaoh's palace, under the premise of being Abram's sister, is a moment of intense anguish for Abram, who finds himself torn between gratitude for the Egyptian hospitality and fear for Sarai's safety. When the true relationship between Abram and Sarai threatens to come to light, it is divine intervention that preserves Sarai from usurpation by Pharaoh. Mysterious illnesses afflicting Pharaoh's household serve as a divine sign, leading to the revelation of the truth and the subsequent expulsion of Abram and his family from Egypt. The experience in Egypt, although marked by trials and errors, also serves as a testimony of God's faithfulness to Abram. Divine protection over Sarai not only reaffirms God's covenant with Abram, but also offers Abram a renewed perspective on the nature of his faith and the reality of divine providence. Upon being forced to leave Egypt, Abram and his family returned to the desert, taking with them not only material riches, but a faith refined by the fire of adversity. The journey to Egypt proves to be a crucial part of Abram's story, a chapter that, although filled with mistakes and trials, teaches valuable lessons about trust, obedience, and the complexity of the human relationship with the divine. As Abram's caravan approached Egypt, the vast fertile lands of the Nile unfolded before them as a promise of relief after the arduous journey through the desert. Egypt, with its abundant harvests and flowing river, represented a hope of survival in the face of the famine that ravaged Canaan. However, this land of plenty also brought with it new challenges and moral dilemmas that would test Abram's faith and integrity in ways he could never have anticipated. As they crossed the border into Egypt, Sarai's beauty did not go unnoticed. The fame of his appearance had already spread, putting Abram in front of a deep fear. Pharaoh's interest in Sarai could mean death for him if their true relationship was known. It was then that Abram, in a moment of human desperation, made the decision to present Sarai as his sister, not his wife. This choice, made under the pressure of the need to protect his family, would throw Abram, Sarai, and everyone with them into a web of unforeseen consequences. Arrival at the Pharaoh's palace was marked by a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Sarai, introduced as Abram's sister, was taken to the palace, an action that promised safety and provision for the group, but at the same time placed Sarai in a vulnerable position. Abram, although relieved by the protection offered by Pharaoh, found himself tormented by guilt and uncertainty, questioning whether his decision had betrayed the trust and covenant that God had established with him. However, the true nature of the relationship between Abram and Sarai would not remain hidden for long. Sarai's presence in the Pharaoh's palace triggered a series of divine events that would reveal the depth of God's protection for her family. Mysterious diseases and scourges afflicted Pharaoh's house, a clear sign of divine disapproval of Sarai's situation. It was only through this divine intervention that the truth about Sarai was revealed to Pharaoh, who, horrified at having been led astray, confronted Abram about his decision to conceal the truth. The revelation of the true relationship between Abram and Sarai put into perspective the complexity of choices made under pressure and the power of faith and trust in God. Abram, faced with the consequences of his actions, was forced to reflect on the meaning of obedience and integrity in his journey of faith. Pharaoh's reaction, although marked by indignation, was also permeated by an understanding of divine sovereignty and protection, leading him to order the departure of Abram and his family from Egypt, but not before providing them with goods and provisions for their return journey. The episode in Egypt, although a moment of moral and spiritual crisis for Abram, also served as a testimony to divine mercy and providence. God, even in the face of human errors and failures, proved faithful to his promise, protecting Sarai and reaffirming his covenant with Abram. This episode reinforced the understanding that true security and provision come from God, and not from human manipulations or artifices. As Abram and his family left Egypt, laden with possessions but also with hard-learned lessons, they returned to Canaan with a faith refined by the fire of trials. The journey through Egypt, with all its hardships and revelations, was not just a detour from the divine promise, but a crucial chapter in Abram's story, a story of error, redemption, and spiritual growth. As Abram and his family leave Egypt, loaded with riches but also with profound lessons, they encounter the vastness of the desert that stretches all the way to Canaan. This return journey is not just a way home. It is a pilgrimage through introspection and spiritual maturation. The desert, with its imposing silence and starry nights, serves as a setting for Abram to reflect on divine intervention in his life and the implications of his decisions. Abram, under the desert night sky, gazes at the stars, remembering God's promise to make his descendants as numerous as they are. This promise, now more real than ever, echoes in your heart with new understanding. The experience in Egypt revealed the fragility of the human condition and the magnitude of God's faithfulness. Abram recognizes his mistakes, particularly his decision to lie about Sarai, but he also sees how God used these mistakes to strengthen his faith and reaffirm his promise. Divine protection over Sarai in Egypt serves as a powerful revelation to Abram about the nature of the God he serves. God is not just a God of promises, but of mercy and protection. This understanding transforms Abram's faith. He realizes that God's faithfulness does not depend on human perfection, but on unwavering trust and obedience to the divine calling. The material wealth accumulated in Egypt, although significant, pales in comparison to the spiritual treasure that Abram takes with him back to Canaan. He returns not as the same man who left, but as a patriarch whose faith has been tested and tried. Abram understands that each challenge faced in Egypt was a preparation for future challenges in Canaan and beyond, a testimony to the ongoing journey of growth and faithfulness. Upon returning to Canaan, Abram and his family are welcomed by the land that God promised. With the experience of Egypt engraved in his memory, Abram looks at Canaan with new eyes. He sees not only a land of promise, but a home where faith in God will bring to fruition the promised offspring and a nation founded on the rock of divine faithfulness. This return to Canaan marks the beginning of a new chapter in Abram's journey of faith. He builds a new altar to God, not just as an act of worship, but as a sign of the renewal of his covenant with the divine. This altar, situated in the heart of Canaan, symbolizes Abram's renewed commitment to follow God, regardless of the trials and uncertainties that the future may bring. Abram and Sarai's stay in Egypt, under the veil of a half-truth, quickly unfolds into a divinely orchestrated plot that would reveal God's power and protection over his chosen family. Abram's decision to present Sarai as his sister, although made out of fear and an attempt at self-preservation, places them in a position of great vulnerability and, paradoxically, becomes the setting for a dramatic manifestation of God's faithfulness. Sarai, recognized for her incomparable beauty, quickly attracts the attention of the Pharaoh, who, enchanted by her, takes her to his palace. This action, although it appears to offer protection and provision for Abram and his followers, carries with it an implicit threat to the divine promise. Tension rises as Sarai is thrust into the heart of Egyptian power, a foreigner whose true identity and significance remain hidden from Egyptian eyes. Not long after Sarai arrives at the palace, strange events begin to unfold. Unexplained illnesses and scourges plague the Pharaoh's house, a clear sign of divine displeasure. These events, which defy any logical explanation, force Pharaoh to seek answers, leading to a divine revelation that exposes the truth about the relationship between Abram and Sarai. Confronted with the truth, Pharaoh is forced to face not only his own fallibility, but also to recognize the sovereignty of Abram's God. The illness in his home serves as a spiritual awakening, a forced reckoning with the actions and beliefs that guided his actions. This moment of crisis becomes a turning point, not only for Abram and Sarai, but also for Pharaoh and his people, who witness the power of Abram's God. Through divine intervention, Sarai is preserved, and the covenant between God and Abram, despite human failings, remains intact. Pharaoh, in a gesture that mixes repentance and recognition of divine authority, returns Sarai to Abram and urges them to leave Egypt. However, this departure is not marked by disgrace, but by a generosity that reflects both Pharaoh's respect for Abram's God and a desire to make amends for the mistakes he has made. As Abram and his family leave Egypt, they carry with them not only material riches, but a wealth of spiritual experiences that redefine their understanding of God and their own faith. Divine intervention in Egypt serves as a powerful reminder of God's constant presence and protection, even in the face of human failures. Abram, in particular, emerges from this experience with a refined faith, a deeper understanding of divine grace, and a renewed commitment to follow God's leading no matter what challenges may arise. As Abram's caravan moves away from the fertile lands of Egypt, re-entering the vast and inhospitable desert on the way to Canaan, the silence of the desert offers Abram a space for reflection. The experience in Egypt, rich in challenges and divine intervention, leaves an indelible mark on your soul. He contemplates God's sovereignty, his mercy and protection, even when human actions fail to reflect professed faith. Abram reflects on the complexity of his choices in Egypt, especially the decision to present Sarai as his sister. He recognizes God's protecting hand over his family, despite their fears and failures. This introspection leads to a deeper recognition of the need for unshakable trust in God, not only in times of peace, but also in times of great danger and uncertainty. The return journey is also a time for Abram to remember the divine promise to make him a great nation, a promise that seemed distant as he faced adversity in Egypt. Divine intervention, protecting Sarai and revealing the truth to Pharaoh, serves as a powerful reaffirmation of God's faithfulness to his word. Abram emerges from this ordeal with renewed faith, aware that God's promises are not merely words, but divine guarantees that transcend human circumstances. Upon returning to Canaan, Abram is moved to build a new altar to the Lord, not just as an act of worship, but as a tangible symbol of the renewal of his covenant with God. This altar, erected on the same ground that God promised to him and his descendants, represents a new beginning, a renewal of Abram's commitment to living in accordance with the divine will, guided by faith and obedience. The experience in Egypt, with all its trials, emerges as a crucial point in Abram's spiritual journey. He realizes that true faith is forged, not in the absence of difficulties, but through overcoming them with divine help. Sarai's protection by the Lord becomes a story of faith to be shared between generations, a testimony to the divine providence that will guide the formation of a nation under God's promise.